Good morning, everyone. My name is Howard Coombs. I'm the Associate Director of Defense Outreach for the Center for International and Defense Policy. If you're not here for Securing the Seas, Strengthening Maritime Security in an Era of Global Challenge, you can leave right now. No shame. But if you aren't and you're here by mistake, please stay and enjoy the conversation we'll have over the next few days on a very important topic. At this moment in international relations and global security, this is an opportunity to talk about a subject that has not been, frankly, given as much priority over the last few decades, which is our maritime forces, and particularly with the renewed emphasis on defense and most recent direction on growing the armed forces. This is a great time to have this conversation. So I encourage you all over the next 2 days to spend time talking to each other, enhance your networks, and discuss some of these topics of great interest to us personally and to our nation as a whole. I'd also like to thank our partners in the Kingston Consortium of International Security. As Dr. Steve Mariano said last night, the consortium has been working for over 20 years to look at defense topics of relevance to not just our nation, but to our partners as well. And some of the partners in this year's conference are the Canadian Defense Academy and Canadian Forces College, the Homeland Defense Institute at the United States Air Force Academy, the NATO Defense College, Strategic Studies Institute of the United States Army War College, and, of course, the United States Naval War College. I thank them all for supporting the conference this year. I would like to mention that if anybody, any organization here would like to be involved with next year's consortium, which will have a defense technological focus, please just talk to me during the conference. We love all of God's children, and we'll get our arms around you. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Metalcraft Marine, the Royal Kingston United Services Institute, and Strategic Reconnaissance for contributing towards the running of this conference. Without further ado, I will bring forward one of our Canadian Visiting Defense Fellows, Colonel Dave Forbes, who will be acting as your Master of Ceremonies today.
Okay, so on behalf of the University Principal, Dr. Dean, I'd like to welcome our Chief of Defense Staff, General Carignan, Dr. Mariano, the Provost of the United States Naval War College, Rear Admiral Armstrong, Commodore Barefoot, Lieutenant General Retired Frawley, Major General Retired Milner, Dr. Murphy, the Director of the Center of International Defense Policy. Defense and security professionals, representatives of industry, interested partners, distinguished visitors and guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Consortium, the Kingston Consortium on International and Security Conference 2025, Securing the Seas, Strengthening Maritime Security in a Time of Global Uncertainty. My name is Colonel Dave Forbes. I, along with Colonel Gauthier and U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Curry, am one of this year's Visiting Defense Fellows at Queen's University Center for International and Defense Policy. And today I will be, for good or bad, your Master of Ceremonies. With this in mind, I should tell you that while in operations in the Philippines, I was once introduced on a Filipino morning talk show as Canada's foremost helicopter pilot. This is a title I hope that you'll remember when judging my competence as your MC. Please allow me to pause the formal introduction to KCIS 2025 while we consider our land acknowledgement. To acknowledge this traditional territory is to recognize its longer history, one predating the establishment of the earliest European colonies. It is also to acknowledge this territory's significance for those Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon it and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants today. Pressing forward with some administration for the day, I must mention some points. We're on the 6th floor of the venue and are currently in the Bellevue room. At the far east end of the long hallway is the Island View Ballroom, where lunch will be provided. Washrooms may be found about halfway down on the same hallway on the right-hand side. You have all successfully arrived and therefore have found the elevators. In addition to this, there is an emergency exit immediately outside these doors and hard right down the stairs. This is a non-smoking facility, and you're politely invited to imbibe outside the main lobby should you wish. Coffee will be available at all times in the hallway, and we will be taking two 30-minute health breaks, one each in the morning and the afternoon, during which light refreshments will also be available. And lastly, this is an unclassified venue. Cell phones are acceptable, but we would politely ask that you all put them on mute. In terms of the agenda, I'll draw your attention to the daily agenda. It's available in print and on the QR code on your tables and in your registration packages. Now, please understand the importance of punctuality and adherence to timings as we advance through a fairly condensed program. Along the way, I'll be here to move the agenda along and try to keep us at least close to being on time. And likewise for moderators, the organizers appreciate your discipline in maintaining the schedule as we progress. We'll open our discussion in earnest shortly with an opening address by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Carignan, and then we'll advance through three carefully curated, moderated panel discussions. The first on historical evolution of maritime security, followed by autonomous maritime strategy and whether or not technology drives national security choices, and then moving on to emerging threats from below, new naval capabilities for the future. Finally, we will then end the day with a keynote address by Rear Admiral Jason Armstrong, Chief of Naval Capabilities for the Royal Canadian Navy. Again, I will prompt where necessary, prod us forward throughout the day and for what promises to be an insight-filled and stimulating program. And for now, I invite my defense colleague, Colonel Shawn Guilbault, visiting defense fellow from Carleton University, to deliver the challenge to the conference. Shawn.
Good morning, ma'am, sirs, esteemed colleagues. As you can see from the topic and my uniform, I am not a naval officer. So we'll see how this goes. I'm Colonel Shawn Guilbault. I'm a visiting defense fellow at the Norm Patterson School of International Affairs, an affiliate with the Canadian Defense and Security Network at Carleton University in Ottawa. And it's really nice to be back in Kingston and here at the KCIS, which I learned last night is apparently in its 20th year. For us at CDSN, which is in a estimable 7th year, Steve sends his regrets, by the way, Howard. The conference is one of the founding components of demonstrating the partnership of the network when we stood up. And of course, the broader CIDP Queens RMC community, bringing together a wide range of defense and security experts, both in and out of uniform. So I said, this is my first time at KCIS, and I've been asked to deliver a challenge to the conference. And I've never quite done that before in this kind of a setting. And I'm not quite sure how they settled on an Air Force guy who grew up mostly in landlocked central Canada and Oklahoma. But as there are no naval officers on fellowship this year, it was either me or the Army guy. So we will see who drew the short straw, me or you. In any case, just so we can baseline some naval experience, I have ridden the Tawasin Ferry, and I did watch SpongeBob with my kids. I felt like a joke about staying at a Holiday Inn last night was a little bit too low-hanging fruit. It's a bit of a truism to say that we're living in a time of rising uncertainty and insecurity. Adam Tooze has referred to a polycrisis, which is pretty much just academic speak for a lot of crises of intertwining geopolitical, economic, environmental, and other crises that play into one another. Kind of like the sum is greater than the whole of its parts, but bad. Economically, we're coming out of a relatively recent pandemic shock. Inflation is coming down, but we're expecting weaker growth potential, reduced fiscal space across many governments. We're facing tariffs and trade wars and uncertainty, and that's driving increasing protectionism, forcing us to develop new markets while we try and protect our own economies. We see this as we're looking to develop a defense industrial base, at least in Canada, which is as much industrial resilience as stimulus, while being asked as a country to make real trade-offs, guns and butter. Geopolitically, we're returning to an era of great power competition, which is in part being waged in the economic sphere. Competition for chips, rare earth minerals, material advantage. China built over 50% of ships last year by global tonnage, and by some estimates, have over 200 times the industrial shipbuilding capacity of the United States. Decades of offshoring and a love of cheap goods have left us with hollowed-out manufacturing sectors. And we saw during COVID what can happen to cooperation in a time of crisis when you don't have domestic capacity to fall back on. And at the same time, we're seeing competition in new technological spaces, quantum sensing, autonomous undersea vehicles, maritime drones. Plenty of opportunity, but also new risk spaces to defend against that require resourcing and thought. The Red Sea crisis and increasing piracy have inhibited freedom of navigation, locking up choke points, disrupting global maritime trade, shadow fleets moving illicit goods, or in the case of Russia, enriching the country through avoidance of sanction regimes. And additionally, recent incidents of damage to undersea cabling in both the Baltic Sea and Taiwan highlight the fragility of critical infrastructure and point to the potential for sabotage to degrade power and communications. And all of this is occurring against a backdrop of climate change as a threat multiplier, driving increased displacement, shifts in resources like fish stocks, more frequent and severe weather events. Significantly for Canada, melting polar ice opens up the Arctic to potential new commercial and military routes, while increasing access to potential untapped offshore resources. This opening of the Arctic as a more accessible area of operations could be a venue for increased resource rivalry or strategic competition, and it'll demand cooperation amongst like-minded Arctic nations for both resourcing and attention to secure. So given all the context of contested maritime space, great power competition, global climate, and technological change, we have crises that demand cooperation at the same time, that it feels like the rules-based order to which we've gotten increasingly used to is under growing strain. And the challenge I'm offering today is, how do we ensure and enable cooperation required to keep the seas secure, reinforcing old ways where necessary, developing new norms, means, and partnerships where required, where we're confronted with resource constraints, with mistrust, an inward turn, in order to be ready for very real potential conflict. Admiral Arleigh Burke, of the named after a airboat fame, words fail me, said, "The instruments of warfare are not solely for waging war. They're means of controlling peace. Naval officers must therefore understand not only how to fight, but how to use the tremendous power which they operate to sustain a world of liberty and peace and justice." Mahan showed the linkages between maritime power and economic prosperity. Control of the seas is critical for security and economy. A rising tide lifts all boats. Whether our shared maritime history in addressing collective security issues like piracy or mutual technological development against new threats, increased NATO cooperation, mutual efforts by Arctic nations within a less austere Northern Ocean, or preparing for major conflict, how do we best work together to confront new problems while ensuring the security of the seas? Thank you.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, General Jennie Carignan. General Carignan is a graduate of the Royal Military College of Canada in engineering. She was commissioned into the military engineers in 1990, and since then, her achievements are remarkable. She has commanded 2 combat engineer regiments. She led the NATO mission in Iraq in 2019-2020. She's participated in 3 expeditionary operations in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Golan Heights, and Afghanistan. From 2021 to 2024, she was appointed Chief of Professional Conduct and Culture. She holds a master's degree in business administration from Université Laval and a second master's degree from the United States Army Command and General Staff College and the School of Advanced Military Studies. She's also a graduate of the National Security Studies Program from Canadian Forces College in Toronto and is the recipient of an honorary doctorate from Huntington University. She was invested as Commander of the Order of Military Merit and is the recipient of the Meritorious Service Medal and the Meritorious Service Cross. She was promoted to the rank of General in July 2024 and appointed as Chief of the Defense Staff. She is also a mother of 4 children, 2 of whom proudly serve in the Canadian military. General Carignan.
Such a great opportunity, conferences such as this, to have the academic community, strategic thinkers, and the military coming together to discuss the very important topics of security. And frankly, it is a little bit intimidating to speak about maritime security in an army uniform. So I do share the discomfort of my colleagues here. And then I would fully agree with Dr. Coombs' assertion that, frankly, we have not been paying attention to maritime security in Canada, judging by the size of our Navy, We have the longest coast in the world, 3 oceans to cover. We are a maritime nation, and we have not been acting as such. And it is reflected in the current state of affairs that we have to construct going forward. But I do have also to acknowledge that we are living in a changing and evolving world, and there's many terms that already have been used to describe the global environment, but I like to use VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous, to kind of describe, generally speaking, the dynamics that we are currently observing globally. And of course, where we have come from informed how we were equipping ourselves in the military, preparing ourselves for the various crises that we were facing. So post-Cold War, the type of operations we were asked to do are fundamentally different than the type of conflict or environment that we need to prepare for now and for the future. So moving from very limited objectives, expeditionary focused operations, towards large-scale conflict, near-peer competition, hybrid warfare. This is the type of environment that we are currently facing, and from what we can see coming in the future, it is not gonna slow down. On the contrary. So the way we are equipped, structured, and prepared currently is not suitable for what we need to do in the future. So hence, a lot of transformation currently ongoing across the CAF at all levels in the 5 different domains, because we are not talking about 3 domains anymore. We are adding space and cyber to the land, maritime, and air domain as well. So I'm already off the my scripted comments because I was thinking on my way here. But there are no more areas currently in the maritime domain where we sort of felt this was a peaceful, diplomatic area that we could use according to the law of the seas. We were well protected in terms of behavior when everybody decided that they were behaving according to the rules that we had given ourselves within the international order. This is being contested, and we are observing a lot of behaviors that are now crossing over from gray areas into more bullyish or aggressive behavior in various parts of the world. It was already mentioned previously, but things like shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea, and I am going to touch on lawfare at the same time. We're kind of using the rules against us by using ships that are perfectly legal, but inserting malicious intents across the whole array of ships traveling, and then inserting criminal or even threatening military activities as part of that shadow fleet. In the South China Sea, everything that we are seeing in terms of built up on reefs, the Scarborough Shoal, the Spratly Island, the Second Thomas Shoals, and the way China is actually using the law to build up bases and basically access and claim territories that normally wouldn't be theirs according to the rules that we have been used to. Dragging anchors, like I'm just, find that absolutely mind-boggling. It's totally okay, like it's things that we've always seen, but all of a sudden it is actually used as a way to cutting cables, communication, disrupting, and again, getting us to react to those various activities and see how we are dealing with such activities. And what about the Taiwan Strait? So as I go around and engage in public speaking, I'm being asked, well, like, why are we insisting on transiting, through the Taiwan Strait? Like, if it bothers China, why are we doing it? Well, again, the Chinese narrative now is actually feeding and informing and misinforming our own people about freedom of navigation versus perfectly normal transiting in international waters. So, add on misinformation as part of that, people who don't necessarily understand very well the issues, and then you have an environment where it becomes increasingly difficult to operate as part of that global environment. So maybe what I want to do is just, tackle a few of the how to respond and then open the floor for questions. So very much looking forward to the discussion. But so what? What are we doing about it? I will mention our defense policy that was published last year, Our North, Strong and Free. It is very clear that the focus of the Canadian Armed Forces has changed following that policy. We are clearly focused on Canada and the Arctic, focused on asserting our sovereignty. So this is priority number one and very, very clear in the policy. And of course, focused on our European and NATO commitments as part of our collective defense, and the Indo-Pacific as part of, again, an area where we need to focus as well. 6 of our 13 major trade partners are in that region, and if we cannot trade or have access to the sea freely, then it does affect our capacity to trade. And then we know that in the current trade environment, things are getting a lot more complex and difficult, so securing those lines is incredibly important. So in terms of areas of focus in Canada, if we are looking at the Arctic, we are looking at a permanent presence in the Arctic at the moment, not only by having people physically present, but also complemented by operations in a near persistent fashion, 11 months of the year pretty much, in the Arctic region. So we have a more robust presence, both Canadian and multinational, via Operation Nanook as well. And I need to speak to our new partners, the Coast Guard. They've always been partners, but now in a more official fashion as part of D&D, bringing in a whole array of additional capabilities, and then working together in increasing our domain awareness, especially in the maritime space. But what I want to mention is that this fight is joint, and it's also whole of government. How to address the complexity of the Arctic or across the world, especially in the current environment that we are facing. It's about joint operations, so the 5 domains integrated together, but also whole of government, because the military does not have all the tools to address the hybrid threat that we are facing, which is a mix of criminal-ish and tools, again, that the military, we don't have in our, so we need to combine our activities with various security apparatus to answer or respond to the threat and anticipate and prevent it as well. In the end, the overall effect that we want to achieve is deterrence. And then deterrence is calculated based on the cost of the adversaries who may want to attempt something. The cost has to be greater than the attempt of doing it. So in the end, what we are trying to achieve via the transformation that we are currently ongoing in the 5 domains in the Canadian Armed Forces is deterrence. So I think I will stop it there and then